When I first picked up A Little Prince, I thought I was revisiting a childhood story. I remember the illustrations, the whimsical planets, and the little prince himself wandering through the stars. But as I read it again, this time with the lens of psychology, I realized it was far more than a children's book. It's a profound exploration of the human mind, emotions, and the way we perceive reality. What strikes me immediately is the story's ability to engage our inner world. The Little Prince doesn't just live in a fantastical universe. He embodies a state of mind that many of us have lost as we grow older. There's curiosity, openness, and almost fearless confrontation with existential questions. As a psychologist, I see in his journey a mirror of our own internal landscapes. The battles, the reflections, and the search for meaning. The genius of The Little Prince lies in its simplicity. Every encounter, every dialogue, carries layers of psychological insight. Take the way he meets the rose on his tiny planet. At first glance, it's a story about love and care, but beneath it, there's a lesson about attachment, perception, and emotional investment. The rose represents both vulnerability and the human tendency to project meaning onto others. Psychologically, it's a perfect metaphor for how we form attachments and the anxieties that often accompany them. Another aspect that draws me in is the way the story challenges our cognitive patterns. Adults in the book, the king, the businessman, the vain man, are caricatures of rigidity, obsession, and disconnection. They are, in many ways, representations of cognitive biases, ego-driven behaviors, and the loss of our childlike capacity for wonder. As I observe their actions, I can't help but reflect on my own life and the ways in which my mind sometimes clings to certainty, status, or external validation instead of embracing curiosity and emotional honesty. The narrative also emphasizes mindful observation. The Little Prince notices details that others overlook. The tiny baobabs threatening his planet, the careful cultivation of his rose, the peculiarities of people he meets. This act of observing without judgment mirrors techniques in psychotherapy and mindfulness practices. It reminds me that one of the keys to mental clarity is simply noticing, naming, and reflecting on the patterns of our thoughts and emotions. Finally, the story sets the stage for the psychological themes we will explore in this series. In the coming parts, we'll dive into how the Little Prince exemplifies the childlike curiosity that fuels self-awareness, attachment patterns and emotional connection, the pitfalls of ego and distraction in adult thinking, the journey toward emotional insight and mindful living. By framing these lessons through the story, we can uncover hidden truths about our minds in a way that feels both accessible and profound. It's a reminder that psychology isn't just clinical theory. It's a lens through which we can understand our own experiences, fears, and desires. So as we embark on this exploration, I invite you to return to your inner child, to notice the world with fresh eyes, and to reflect on how a simple story about a little prince in the stars can illuminate the complexities of our minds. As I continue to reflect on the Little Prince, what strikes me most is his unwavering curiosity. Unlike the adults he meets, who are consumed by rules, status, and routines, the Little Prince asks questions. Simple yet profound questions that open doors to understanding, empathy, and self-discovery. From a psychological perspective, this curiosity represents the inner child, a part of ourselves that is naturally exploratory, open, and free from the constraints of fear and overthinking. In my work as a psychologist, I often see how the childlike curiosity within us becomes buried under layers of conditioning. Society teaches us to conform, to stop asking why, to suppress wonder in favor of logic or productivity. But the Little Prince reminds us that curiosity is more than a playful trait. It is a vital cognitive tool. When we allow ourselves to question, to wonder, and to explore, we engage in a form of mental flexibility that is essential for emotional intelligence and psychological resilience. Consider his questions to the fox. What does it mean to tame someone? Or, why do you want to tame you? These are not just questions about relationships. They are questions about the nature of connection, trust, and mutual vulnerability. Psychologically, this mirrors what we encounter in therapy, the exploration of relational patterns and the conscious observation of our attachment behaviors. The Little Prince's approach is intentional, thoughtful, and open-ended, qualities that many adults lose in the process of growing up. This inner child curiosity is closely tied to self-awareness. In order to truly understand ourselves, our desires, fears, and motivations, we must approach our thoughts and emotions with the same wonder and openness that the little prince demonstrates. He does not take anything for granted. He notices, he questions, he reflects. For example, when he examines his tiny plant and the baobabs that threaten it, he is not just tidying up his world. He is engaging in metacognition, thinking about the consequences of inaction, understanding cause and effect, and observing patterns of growth and decay. In psychology, this is fundamental to cognitive restructuring and emotional regulation. The story also teaches us about the courage to remain open in a closed world. The little prince's encounters with adults often highlight rigidity and narrow-mindedness. The businessman counts stars without appreciating their beauty. The king demands obedience without understanding. The vain man seeks admiration without meaningful connection. In contrast, the little prince's childlike curiosity allows him to remain emotionally and cognitively flexible, a trait associated with resilience and mental health. One of the deepest lessons here is that our inner child is not naive. It is intelligent. It perceives truth beneath the surface, senses the essential qualities of people and experiences, and reminds us of what truly matters. From a psychological standpoint, cultivating this inner child helps us reconnect with authenticity, creativity, and emotional depth. It teaches us to observe our thoughts without judgment, to question our assumptions, and to approach relationships with openness rather than fear or control. As we move forward in this series, I want you to reflect on your own inner child. Are you curious about your thoughts and feelings? Do you allow yourself to ask questions that might feel uncomfortable but ultimately lead to insight? Or have you, like many adults, buried that curiosity under routine, habit, and fear of being misunderstood? In the next part, we'll explore the theme of attachment and emotional connection, using the little prince's relationship with the rose as a lens to understand how our early bonds shape our emotional world. We'll see how love, care, and anxiety intertwine, and how psychological insights can help us nurture healthier, more secure relationships. Because the little prince shows us that curiosity is not just a trait, it is a pathway to mental clarity, emotional insight, and lifelong learning. As I reflect on the little prince, one relationship stands out above all: his connection with the rose. On the surface, it seems simple, a young prince caring for a delicate flower on his tiny planet. But from a psychological perspective, this relationship is rich with lessons about attachment, vulnerability, and emotional investment. The rose represents something deeply human: the people and things we care for, the relationships we invest in, and emotional bond that give our lives meaning. In psychology, we often talk about attachment patterns, the ways early experiences with caregivers shape how we relate to others as adults. The little prince's devotion to his rose is a perfect illustration of secure attachment. He nurtures it, worries for it, and feels joy in its growth. He is aware of its fragility, yet he does not smother it. He loves it while respecting its essence. Yet, the rose also introduces anxiety and fear, the awareness that love is delicate and can be lost. The little prince experiences moments of doubt and worry. Is the rose being honest? Is it truly unique? These feelings mirror what many people experience in relationships: the tension between closeness and vulnerability. Psychologists call this emotional tension the anxious attachment response, where our desire for closeness is accompanied by fear of abandonment or loss. The story also highlights the importance of emotional responsibility. The little prince learns that caring deeply requires both attention and accountability. In modern psychology, this is echoed in the idea of mindful relational practice, understanding that our emotions, actions, and expectations impact others, and that maintaining healthy bonds requires self-awareness, empathy, and consistent care. Another lesson emerges when the little prince leaves his planet and encounters other characters. Through these journeys, he begins to understand that the rose's value is not only in its appearance, but in the emotional investment he has made in it. This is profoundly aligned with attachment theory. Relationships gain significance not just by external attributes, but by the meaning, care, and attention we contribute. In other words, love and attachment are co-created experiences, shaped by both our actions and our perceptions. Psychologically, this encourages reflection. How do we value our relationships? Are we present, attentive, and aware of the emotional needs of those we care about? Or do we take connections for granted, assuming they will endure without effort? The Little Prince reminds us that emotional connection requires conscious presence, a principle central to healthy adult relationships. The Rose also teaches us about self-reflection and projection. At times, the Little Prince projects his desires, fears, and expectations onto the Rose, interpreting his behavior through his emotional lens. In psychological terms, this is known as projection, a mechanism we all use unconsciously in relationships. By recognizing our projections, we can engage more consciously, distinguishing our perceptions from reality and fostering healthier bonds. Finally, this story emphasizes a courage to love despite uncertainty. Emotional vulnerability is risky. We may experience disappointment, rejection, or loss. Yet, the act of caring deeply, of committing to relationships, is essential for emotional growth and mental health. The Little Prince's relationship with the Rose embodies this courage. It shows that love and attachment, while potentially anxiety-inducing, are also sources of meaning, joy, and resilience. As we move into the next part of this series, we'll explore the challenges of adult distraction and ego-driven behaviors, drawing lessons from the Little Prince's encounters with the king, the vain man, and the businessman. These characters provide striking insights into how our minds can become preoccupied, judgmental, or disconnected, and how mindfulness and awareness can restore balance and clarity. Because at the core, the Little Prince teaches us that relationships are not just about love. They are mirrors for our minds, revealing both our deepest fears and our capacity for growth, empathy, and connection. As I continue to explore the Little Prince, I am always struck by his encounters with adults. The king, the vain man, the businessman, and geographer. At first glance, these characters seem whimsical, almost comical. But from a psychological perspective, they are mirrors of our own minds when we become trapped in distraction, ego, and judgment. Each character highlights how easily the human mind can lose clarity and focus, prioritizing appearances, control, or status over presence and meaning. Take the king, for example. He desires obedience and authority, yet his commands are meaningless because they lack true connection. Psychologically, this represents the mind consumed by control and the need for validation. When we seek external approval excessively, we are disconnected from our inner compass. The king's obsession with power is a metaphor for ego-driven thinking, where the mind prioritizes dominance over authentic experience. Then there's the vain man, who craves admiration and recognition. He symbolizes ego inflation and the trap of constant social comparison. Modern psychology reminds us that this preoccupation can lead to anxiety, low self-esteem, and compulsive behaviors. The Little Prince sees through the vanity, highlighting the importance of self-awareness and the courage to disengage from societal approval in order to remain authentic. The businessman is equally telling. He counts stars obsessively, claiming ownership over them, yet never appreciates their beauty. This mirrors the human tendency to focus on quantification, accumulation, or achievement, often at the expense of emotional fulfillment. In psychological terms, it's a lesson on cognitive rigidity and fixation on goals, without attending to the present moment. The businessman's mind is lost in abstraction, disconnected from experience, much like many adults today who prioritize productivity over meaningful connection. These encounters teach a profound lesson. The adult mind often loses its childlike capacity for observation, wonder, and presence. We become preoccupied with judgments, comparisons, and distractions that prevent us from truly understanding ourselves or others. From a psychological standpoint, this is where mindfulness and metacognition come into play. By observing our thoughts without judgment, we regain clarity, noticing patterns and behaviors that were previously unconscious. The Little Prince acts as a mirror here, reminding us to slow down, notice details, and question our priorities. For example, he asks questions that adults dismiss as trivial, but these questions reveal profound truths about life, relationships, and emotional health. In therapy, I see similar patterns. Clients often overlook simple but vital truths about themselves because their minds are cluttered with ego-driven thoughts or social pressures. Another lesson from these encounters is the value of self-reflection over judgment. The adults judge each other or their surroundings according to arbitrary standards. Psychologically, judgment often stems from fear, insecurity, or unmet needs. The Little Prince, however, observes without condemnation, a practice akin to mindful awareness, allowing him to learn and grow rather than react defensively. Finally, these interactions underscore the importance of choosing attention wisely. Our mental energy is finite, and where we place it shapes our perceptions, emotions, and actions. The adults in the story squander their attention on trivial or self-centered concerns, while the little prince invests his attention in understanding, connection, and curiosity. This is a critical psychological lesson. By directing our focus toward meaningful experiences and relationships, we cultivate mental clarity, emotional resilience, and a deeper sense of purpose. As we move into the final part of this series, we will explore the overarching lessons of the story. Living with mindful awareness, emotional depth, and the courage to connect. We'll reflect on how the Little Prince's philosophy can be applied to everyday life, offering profound guidance for mental and emotional well-being. Because ultimately, the Little Prince reminds us that the mind is both fragile and powerful, and how we choose to engage with it determines the richness of our inner and outer worlds. As we reach the final part of this exploration, I want to bring together the lessons that the Little Prince offers about the mind, emotional life, and human connection. Throughout his journey, the Little Prince demonstrates qualities that psychology now recognizes as essential for mental well-being: curiosity, presence, emotional awareness, and courage in relationships. One of the deepest insights in the story is captured in the phrase, "What is essential is invisible to the eye." Psychologically, this reminds us of the most important aspects of life: love, trust, self-awareness, emotional resilience cannot be measured, bought, or superficially observed. They must be experienced, reflected upon, and nurtured. In therapy, I often encourage clients to pause and notice these invisible essentials within themselves, their values, emotions, and patterns of thought. These are the true foundations of a fulfilled mind. The Little Prince also teaches the importance of mindful observation. By attending to small details, the careful tending of his rose, the removal of baobabs, the consideration of his encounters with other characters, he models what psychologists call metacognitive awareness. This means observing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. When we cultivate this skill, we become less reactive, more compassionate, and more capable of making conscious choices. Another profound lesson is about emotional courage. The Little Prince loves the rose despite uncertainty and risk. Similarly, he engages with the world openly, asking questions, forming bonds, and seeking understanding. In psychological terms, this is a courage to remain vulnerable, to face our fears, and to connect meaningfully with others. Vulnerability, as modern psychologists like Brené Brown emphasize, is not weakness. It is a pathway to genuine intimacy and emotional growth. The story also highlights the balance between autonomy and connection. The Little Prince's journey is both inward and outward. He explores himself, reflects on his emotions, and simultaneously engages with other beings. Psychologically, this mirrors the idea that mental health is not just about self-sufficiency or attachment alone, but the integration of both, being capable of self-reflection while forming meaningful relationships. Finally, the Little Prince reminds us of the power of perspective. Adults often lose sight of what truly matters because they are caught in routines, judgments, and distractions. By returning to a childlike perspective, curious, attentive, open to wonder, we reconnect with our minds in a way that fosters creativity, empathy, and emotional depth. In therapy, cultivating this perspective can help us break free from cognitive distortions, anxiety, and negative patterns. So, how can we apply these lessons in everyday life? Here are a few reflections. Reconnect with your inner child. Ask simple, open-ended questions about your life and emotions. Approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. Practice mindful observation. Notice your thoughts, feelings, and surroundings without judgment. This strengthens awareness and emotional regulation. Invest in meaningful relationships. Like the Little Prince's rose, relationships require attention, care, and emotional courage. Embrace vulnerability. Allow yourself to feel, express, and connect, even when there is uncertainty. Prioritize what is truly essential. Focus on love, empathy, growth, and inner peace rather than status, comparison, or distraction. In conclusion, The Little Prince is more than a story. It is a guide to the human mind. It teaches that curiosity, presence, and emotional courage are not just virtues. They are essential tools for mental and emotional well-being. By integrating these lessons, we can live with greater awareness, deeper connections, and a richer understanding of ourselves and others. Ultimately, the story challenges us to ask, how often do we allow ourselves to see with the heart, to love with courage, and to observe the invisible essentials of our own minds? Following the Little Prince's example, we can cultivate a life that is both psychologically rich and profoundly human.